Once upon a time, nestled in a serene valley, lay the quaint village of Kuru. Life here was simple yet harmonious, with the villagers living in close connection to the lush green forest that enveloped their home. Towering trees whispered secrets of the past, and the air always carried a sense of peace. The people of Kuru were deeply rooted in their traditions, one of which stood out as their most sacred rule: every girl was to remain pure, keeping her virginity until marriage. This belief was more than a custom, it was the very fabric of their identity. Parents raised their daughters with strict discipline, ensuring they upheld this tradition with pride. They would often boast to each other, saying, "My daughter is pure, just like all the girls in our village." This sentiment became a badge of honor, a testament to their values and upbringing. But one day, the village's tranquil existence was shattered by an unexpected series of misfortunes. Crops began to fail, livestock fell ill, and the once bountiful forest seemed to turn against them. The villagers, gripped by fear and confusion, turned to their elders for answers. After much deliberation and prayers, a divine revelation came forth: only the sacrifice of a true virgin could lift the curse that plagued Kuru. Adding to the gravity of the situation was an enticing promise. The virgin maiden chosen for the sacrifice would not only save the village but also marry the prince, bringing great wealth and prestige to her family. This announcement sent waves of excitement through the village. Parents, eager for their daughters to be honored and their families elevated to royal status, flocked to the palace with unwavering faith in their daughter's purity. They saw this as an opportunity to both uphold their traditions and secure a prosperous future. The palace courtyard soon filled with hopeful families, their eyes glistening with a mix of ambition and desperation. Among the gathered crowd, an elder named Abaj emerged, holding a grand ceremonial pot adorned with intricate carvings. He stepped forward solemnly, his presence commanding the attention of all. The fate of Kuru now rested on what was to unfold, as the villagers braced themselves for the moment that would determine their destiny. In the crowded courtyard of Kuru's palace, anticipation thickened as Elder Abaj held the ceremonial pot aloft. "Inside this pot," he announced, "is a sacred necklace, blessed by the gods. Only a true virgin maiden can retrieve it. This is the test the gods have given us to find the one who will lift the curse and bring salvation to our village." The villagers nodded solemnly, and the girls formed a nervous line. Their parents, standing behind them, brimmed with confidence, certain of their daughter's purity. One by one, the maidens approached the pot, trembling hands reaching in. Each time, they came up empty-handed. A hush fell over the crowd as the first girl tried, then the second, then the third, all without success. Whispers rippled through the gathering, their optimism slowly replaced by unease. The tension deepened when it was the chief's daughter's turn. Known for their beauty and grace, the eldest stepped forward confidently, only to withdraw her hand with nothing. Her sisters followed, but neither could retrieve the necklace. By the time the youngest, her hands shaking with fear, reached into the pot and also failed, the villagers were dumbfounded. Murmurs of disbelief filled the air. "Not even the chief's daughters," someone gasped. The elders exchanged grave looks, their confidence shaken. How could this be? They had always believed in the purity of their daughters and the unyielding strength of their traditions. The failure of the test cast a dark shadow over the village, and news of the event spread like wildfire. As the crowd tried to make sense of the failure, a voice from the girls broke through the silence. "It's not our fault, it's Aunt Isime," they shouted. The murmurs shifted focus to Isime, a woman who had come to Kuru from the city years ago. Suspicion quickly grew into blame. "She brought her city ways here and corrupted our girls," an elder woman hissed. Others nodded in agreement, their voices rising with anger. "Our daughters were pure before she arrived," one man muttered bitterly. And so, the villagers' focus turned to uncovering Isime's story, a woman whose arrival in Kuru had seemed harmless but now stood at the center of their misfortune. Years ago, Isaim had come to visit her aunt in the quiet village. No one had imagined that her presence would one day be tied to such chaos, yet her influence now threatened to unravel the very traditions that Kuru had cherished for generations. Isaim came from the big city, a world far removed from the quiet traditions of Kuru. She was strikingly beautiful, always dressed in bright and revealing clothes that seemed to glow in the village's modest surroundings. Isaim walked with a regal confidence, her every step commanding attention. The men of Kuru couldn't help but notice her, whispering to each other as she passed. "Wow, look at her. She's stunning," they said, their admiration obvious. The village girls also watched her, captivated by her elegance and charm. They envied her boldness and the attention she received, dreaming of dressing and walking with the same self-assurance. "I want to wear clothes like Isaim," one girl said wistfully. Another chimed in, "She looks so confident and beautiful." To the girls, Isaim was a mystery, different, exciting, and everything they were not. Her vibrant appearance and fearless demeanor made them wonder what it would feel like to be so admired. "Isaim is so cool," one of them remarked. They began to observe her every move, hoping to unlock the secret to her allure. But what the villagers didn't know was that Isaim harbored a secret that would shake the very foundation of Kuru. While her beauty and charm drew admiration, there was more to her story. The men who showered her with gifts and money weren't just captivated by her looks. Isaim would meet them in secret, offering companionship in ways that Kuru's people would never approve of. The bright clothes and confident smile concealed a life that was at odds with the village's sacred traditions. One day, Asabi, the chief's eldest daughter, grew curious about Isaim's seemingly endless stream of new belongings and money. As a dutiful girl who had always followed the village's strict rules, Asabi found herself intrigued and puzzled. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to quietly follow Isaim. Hiding in the shadows, Asabi watched as Isaim met a man in a secluded spot. After a brief exchange, Isaim walked away with a small bag of money. Shock rippled through Asabi as she pieced it together. "So, this is Isaim's secret," she thought. "The men give her gifts for spending time with them." For a moment, Asabi was horrified, but curiosity soon replaced her initial reaction. What if she could have what Isaim had? The gifts, the attention, things she had never considered before now seemed tantalizingly within reach. And with that thought, the first cracks began to form in Asabi's resolve, threatening to unravel everything she had believed about herself and her place in the village. Asabi, once a steadfast follower of the village's sacred rules, found herself unable to shake her newfound curiosity. She longed to feel the same sense of importance and excitement that Isaim exuded. The very next day, she noticed a young merchant who had been glancing at her repeatedly. Determined to experiment, Asabi approached him, mimicking what she had seen Isaim do. In a secluded meeting, the merchant offered her gifts and money, and Asabi felt an unfamiliar thrill. "This is so easy," she thought, marveling at how quickly she could attain things she had only dreamed of. For the first time, she felt special, as if she had unlocked a secret treasure. Unable to contain her excitement, Asabi confided in her friends about her discovery. She revealed Isaim's hidden dealings and explained how spending time with men could lead to gifts and money. Her friends were initially shocked, their traditional upbringing clashing with this new idea. But curiosity soon got the better of them. What harm could there be in trying, they wondered, if it meant gaining the attention and luxuries they had never known. Before long, more village girls began to follow in Isaim's footsteps. They traded their modest attire for brighter, more alluring clothing and started using makeup to enhance their appearance. The once innocent streets of Kuru became filled with whispers and giggles as the girls shared their stories of newfound gifts and admiration. "If Isaim and Asabi can do it, why can't we?" they reasoned. Isaim, observing the dramatic shift in the village, saw an opportunity to expand her influence. She began organizing meetings between the girls and the men, offering her guidance in exchange for a share of the gifts and money the girls received. "I'll arrange everything," she assured them. "All you have to do is be nice to the men." The girls, dazzled by the promise of wealth and attention, trusted her completely and followed her instructions without question. What had started as a secret quickly grew into a movement, altering the fabric of Kuru's society. The once proud traditions of the village began to erode, replaced by a new culture that revolved around appearances and material gain. Yet, beneath the surface, an unease brewed, as the consequences of these changes loomed over the village like a gathering storm. The girls reveled in the attention and gifts from the men, enjoying the thrill of being noticed and the freedom to buy things they had never dreamed of owning. The excitement of this new lifestyle began to overshadow the village's cherished traditions of purity and self-respect. What had once been the cornerstone of their upbringing started to feel distant and unimportant. The secret meetings became like an exclusive club, where they bonded over their shared adventures, all carefully hidden from their families and the elders. To the girls, it was all in good fun, but they didn't realize the profound changes their actions were causing. As time passed, more girls joined Isim's secret gatherings. What began as a few seeking gifts quickly turned into a widespread practice. Over time, the gifts themselves became less significant compared to the thrill of the attention and the sense of being admired. This newfound excitement became addictive, and the girls chased it eagerly, unaware of the growing divide it was creating in their community. The village elders and parents, oblivious to the secret lives their daughters were leading, continued their daily routines with confidence in their traditions. They spoke proudly of the village's values, often reminding the girls of the importance of purity and respect. Believing the lessons were being absorbed, they had no inkling that the sacred traditions they so revered were being quietly eroded. The girls played their parts well. They attended gatherings, completed their daily chores, and outwardly seemed like the dutiful daughters their parents believed them to be. But behind closed doors, they lived a life that defied everything the village stood for. The strong cultural values of Kuru, once upheld with pride, were slowly unraveling under the weight of these hidden practices, setting the stage for a reckoning that no one in the village could have foreseen. The taboo of secret meetings with men had become commonplace among the village girls of Kuru. What once would have brought shame and guilt was now seen as a way of life that offered freedom and attention. The values they had grown up with faded into the background, replaced by a quiet rebellion that went unnoticed by the elders and parents. The strong traditions of the village crumbled slowly, hidden beneath the surface of daily life. Then, one day, disaster struck. The lush plants that surrounded Kuru began to wither, their leaves turning brown and dry. Animals, once lively, grew weak and started dying. Worst of all, the villagers themselves fell ill with strange, unexplained symptoms. Fear gripped Kuru as more people succumbed to the mysterious affliction. The village, once vibrant and thriving, was shrouded in despair. The villagers, desperate for answers, turned to Agbaji, the revered oracle known for his wisdom and connection to the gods. They gathered at his home, the air heavy with worry. The elders, speaking on behalf of the people, explained the calamities that had befallen them and pleaded for guidance. Agbaji listened in silence, his eyes closed as though seeking insight from the spiritual world. After what felt like an eternity, Agbaji finally spoke. "The gods are angry," he said, his voice heavy with solemnity. "They are displeased because the sacred traditions have been broken. The purity that once defined Kuru has been lost." The villagers were stunned as his words sank in. Agbaji continued, "To appease the gods, a great sacrifice must be made. 2 virgin maidens must carry the offering to the sacred altar." Gasps echoed through the crowd. A sacrifice was no small matter, but the mention of virgin maidens struck a deep chord. The villagers had always prided themselves on the purity of their daughters. Now, they faced the chilling reality that their cherished values might no longer hold true. The curse threatening Kuru was not just an external force, it was a reflection of the village's own hidden fractures, and the cost of repairing it could change everything. The village elders, once steadfast in their belief in the purity of Kuru's young maidens, were now filled with unease. They had always trusted that the traditions they upheld so fiercely were being followed, but Agbaji's words planted seeds of doubt. His warning was clear: the sacrifice must be made within 2 days, or the curse would worsen, bringing untold suffering. The villagers left Agbaji's home burdened by the grim task ahead. They had always prided themselves on their daughter's purity, but the strange events of recent months cast a shadow over their confidence. The next morning, the town crier's bell rang out through the streets, his voice calling, "All young maidens, come to the palace." Families gathered their daughters, knowing this was about the vital sacrifice Agbaji had spoken of. The air was tense as every young girl and her parents made their way to the palace. The elders, desperate to restore peace, prepared for the virgin pot test, a sacred ritual to determine purity. As Agbaji performed the test, dipping each girl's hand into the pot in search of the god sign, the unthinkable happened: not a single girl passed. The once proud village of Kuru was left in shock. The cherished belief in their daughter's purity was shattered, and the realization struck that not one maiden remained untouched. The whispers spread quickly: Isaim had corrupted them all. Her influence had turned the girls into something the village could scarcely comprehend, and the once honored traditions had crumbled under her sway. The weight of the curse pressed down harder than ever as Agbaji's solemn voice broke the silence. The gods see everything. Their anger is just. We must continue the search, or the curse will consume us all. Panic rippled through the villagers as the truth settled in. The pride they had taken in their customs was now a hollow memory. Blame fell swiftly on Isaim, who had become the embodiment of everything that had gone wrong. Kuru, once a symbol of tradition and purity, now faced a grim and uncertain future, with time running out to appease the gods. The once proud village was left fractured, consumed by dread and urgency, as they struggled to reckon with the truth and the consequences of their forgotten values. Isaim stood in silence, her heart heavy with the realization of how deeply her actions had impacted the village. The once envied girl who had stirred admiration now found herself at the center of Kuru's despair. The gods, once believed to be pleased with the village's traditions, were now angered, and the curse that had befallen Kuru was a direct consequence of her influence. Her mind raced as the villagers' murmurs of blame and judgment echoed through her thoughts. She had never anticipated that her desire for attention and admiration would lead to such devastating consequences. As the elders announced their decision, Isaim felt a chill run through her. She had heard stories of sacrifices, of the god's wrath, but never had she imagined that she would be the one chosen to face such a fate. The weight of the village's expectations bore down on her, and the eyes of the entire community felt like a burning judgment. The villagers had once looked to her as a symbol of beauty and freedom, but now she was seen as the cause of their downfall. The elders, with grim faces, declared that Isaim would carry the sacrifice to the sacred altar to appease the gods and lift the curse that had gripped the land. It was a responsibility that she could not refuse. As the villagers gathered in the days that followed, there was no room for argument or escape. The elders had spoken, and the fate of the village depended on her willingness to atone for the mistakes she had made. Isaim's heart ached as she considered the girls who had followed her lead. Their lives, too, were irrevocably changed, and she now realized the true weight of the path she had paved for them. She had led them away from the values that had once kept the village strong, and now, she was the one who had to bear the consequences of their collective actions. With no choice but to accept the responsibility, Isaim prepared to face the altar. The village would never be the same, and neither would she. The once confident girl from the city was now a symbol of the village's lost purity and the desperate need to restore balance. As she stepped forward, the air was thick with the tension of the village's fate, and Isaim's heart heavy with the burden of the sacrifice that awaited her. Isaim's knees trembled as she knelt before the sacred altar, the weight of the calabash still heavy on her head. She gazed at the offering she had brought, fruits, flowers, and precious items meant to appease the gods. But now, in the solitude of the forest, it all seemed insignificant compared to the enormity of her actions. The trees whispered in the wind, as if the very forest itself were listening to her plea. With tear-filled eyes, Aysime cried out to the gods, her voice breaking under the weight of her regret. She had led the village astray, broken sacred traditions, and now the entire community was suffering. She begged for forgiveness, not just for herself, but for the girls she had influenced, for the parents who had trusted their daughters to follow the old ways, and for the elders who now saw their traditions crumble in the wake of her recklessness. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the distance. For a long moment, Aysime remained still, lost in her sorrow and regret. She wondered if the gods would even listen. She had strayed so far from the path, caused so much harm, and yet she couldn't undo what had already been done. The curse had to be lifted, the village had to be saved, but she didn't know if she was worthy of redemption. When she finally stood, her body aching with exhaustion, Aysime took one last look at the altar. There, in the stillness of the forest, she made a silent vow. She would do everything in her power to help the village heal. The curse might not be lifted by this act alone, but she would try, with whatever strength she had left, to restore the balance that had been broken. As she turned to begin her long walk back, the forest seemed less oppressive, as if the gods had heard her cries. She had no idea if they would forgive her, but she now understood the weight of the traditions she had disregarded. There was no more running from the consequences of her actions. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long while, Aysime felt the smallest flicker of hope that somehow, she might still make things right. Aysime's return to the village was met with a cold silence, the weight of her punishment heavy in the air. The villagers watched her with wary eyes, some relieved that the curse had lifted, while others were unable to shake their anger and disappointment. The plants, which had once been withered and dying, now began to show signs of life again, and the sick animals slowly regained their strength. It was clear, the gods had accepted the sacrifice, and the village was healing, but Aysime's own healing had only just begun. Agaj, the oracle, stood before the village, his voice somber. "The curse is lifted," he declared. "The gods have accepted the sacrifice, but Aysime must face the consequences of her actions. She is not permitted to leave the village for 12 years. During this time, she will be responsible for carrying all sacrifices to the gods." His words were final, and the villagers murmured in agreement, though their faces remained filled with a mixture of relief and resentment. Aysime's punishment was severe. She was given a small hut near the shrine, isolated from the rest of the village. The once vibrant girl from the city, who had sought admiration and attention, was now living in solitude, separated from the life she had known. The villagers treated her as an outcast, their glances filled with disdain. She no longer had a place among them, and she spent her days in quiet reflection, carrying the sacrifices to the gods, tending to the shrine, and carrying the heavy burden of repentance. The work was exhausting, but Aysime did it without complaint. She was determined to fulfill her duties, even though she knew they would never make up for the harm she had caused. As the days passed, she found herself lost in thought, contemplating the choices she had made and the lives she had affected. She had once been filled with the excitement of being admired, but now, in the silence of her hut, she realized how hollow that attention had been. The realization hit her with a painful clarity: she had let the village, her family, and herself down. But now, all she could do was live with the consequences. Meanwhile, the village began to rebuild itself. The elders worked to restore the traditions that had once been the cornerstone of their community. They emphasized the importance of purity, respect, and honoring their cultural values. The younger generation, many of whom had been led astray by Aysime's example, now looked to the elders for guidance, eager to learn the lessons of the past. The village would never be the same again, and neither would Aysime. As the years stretched ahead of her, she knew that her journey of repentance was far from over. But for the first time, she understood that true redemption came not from attention or admiration, but from facing the consequences of her actions and working to make things right. It was a painful path, but it was the only one left for her to walk. The elders of Kuru made a decisive change to protect the village from the influence of the outside world. They declared that no one from the city would be allowed into Kuru, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Isaim's story became a cautionary tale for the children of the village. Parents spoke of the girl from the city who brought trouble to their community, emphasizing the importance of respecting traditions and making wise, honorable choices. Her life served as a constant reminder of the consequences of straying from the path of respect and purity. For 12 long years, Isaim remained isolated in the village, her punishment both physical and deeply emotional. She lived with the regret of her actions and the knowledge that she had brought shame upon herself, her family, and the entire village. This period became a painful yet transformative journey for her, as she learned that true beauty and worth come from within, and that respecting one's culture and traditions was essential to personal and collective integrity. As the years passed, the village slowly healed, but the memory of what had happened lingered. Isaim's story was passed down through generations as a lesson in humility, respect, and the importance of making wise choices. It was a sad ending for her, but it also taught the village of Kuru to value and protect their cultural heritage more than ever before. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment on what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting stories just like this one. Thank you.